don't let lack of experience in the rest of your life stop you, and take every opportunity to take advantage of programs at your local university, online, for writing. Whatever genre you're interested in, there's so much out there on the web that you can take advantage of that will help you.
Hi, I'm Ebony, and I believe that stories change lives, and everyone has a story worth telling. Sometimes, unfortunately, we let our self-doubt get in the way of us writing our stories and sharing our stories. So that's why I created Motivation to Write as a source of motivation and inspiration to help writers like you and me share our stories with the world. So I talk to the experts ranging from entrepreneurs to marketers to authors to therapists to psychologists who share their knowledge and their advice to help writers like you and me step into our full potential.
Mirinda Kossoff is a writer and the author of The Rope of Life, a memoir exploring the life of her Jewish-turned Southern Baptist father and her childhood in Virginia during the 1950s and turbulent 60s. Born in Greensboro, North Carolina, Mirinda Kossoff has traveled to Japan, England, France, and South America. In addition to writing, she's taught essay writing at Duke University. She has been an assistant managing editor at a prominent newspaper, a metalsmith, jewelry designer, and member artist in Chapel Hill's Frank Gallery. All right, Mirinda Kossoff.
Yes.
Properly, yes. The author of The Rope of Life and just a life journeyist. I know I'm making up that word, but that's kind of what I think of you as. You have such an interesting path that you've traveled to get to this first publication. This is your first book, right? The Rope of Life?
It is.
Your first. Yeah.
It's a memoir.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. And it's my first book.
Yeah. And this was recently published. What year was this?
Yes. Just last fall.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I have to ask, because this is what interests me most, is when people first realize that they are a writer, or at least that they want to write. When did that happen? Did you have this first inkling that writing was something that you wanted to do or you were good at?
That's a great question, because I never thought of myself until recently as a writer. I know it may sound odd because I've written my whole adult life.
Yeah.
But I figured to call myself a writer, I would have had a few books under my belt.
Mm-hmm.
But that wasn't the case. But the fact of the matter is, I guess I was motivated to really start writing once my children were a little older. I had identical twin sons, and by the time they were 6, I was a single parent, and it was very difficult to do anything outside of my demanding daily job and taking care of them. So I remember driving home one day from work, and as you know, NPR used to have commentary. They don't do it as much now, but there was personal commentary. And I happened to hear someone on the local affiliate, WUNC, here in Chapel Hill, the Chapel Hill area. And he did a really nice, I think they were limited to 5 minutes, more or less. And he did a really nice commentary. And I remember thinking, oh, I can do that. And I have things I want to say. So that was the first time. And so I wrote a commentary. I looked at what the specifications were, the length, and I sent it in to the producers of the local WUNC commentary. And they liked it. They had me in. They said, well, not everybody who can write can talk on the radio. So we'd like you to try to record. And that went swimmingly. So, and I got a lot of feedback from that first radio commentary. Probably the most feedback of any that I did subsequently. And that stoked my fire to keep writing. And I eventually had a column with area-wide, the North Carolina Triangle area-wide weekly paper called The Spectator, which has been bought out by the Indie Week, the Independent, that's published out of Durham. But I had a weekly column there, and that started to get the ball rolling in terms of me writing regularly and having ideas that I wanted to share.
I love that story because, a lot of people don't really discover writing until later in life. There are some that discover when they're like in elementary school or whatever. And then there are some that it just kind of happens. Like you heard something on the radio and then you write in and then, oh, I really like this, and you get good feedback. And I think that's just, it's important to hear that because I feel like a lot of people, especially when you get into your 30s, 40s, 50s, you feel like, I don't know what I could do. Like, what am I good at? And sometimes if you just pay attention to these opportunities, or if something catches your ear or catches your eye, and you take advantage of that opportunity, or you try something new, that opens a new door for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Of course, I've been writing as part of my, I guess it was my second career as a communications director. Originally, it was with for the vice president of university relations at Duke. And I wrote speeches, I wrote grants, I wrote all kinds of stuff. And eventually I left and went to work for the News and Observer, which is the newspaper of record in North Carolina, in Raleigh. And then I came back to Duke as communications director for the law school. So I wrote articles. I revamped the law school magazine, and I started writing articles for it. And I would hire people too to write articles, but I had a budget. Yeah. So I've been I call it utility writing. Yeah. I've been utility writing most of my career, but it was never, it was just part of my work, and it wasn't anything I was really excited about. I just wanted to do a good job. And
so did you, Mirinda, did you study writing at all in college?
No. I started out as an English major because that was my first love. And I was in college at the height of the Vietnam War, and I was a Vietnam War protester, and sociology just seemed so relevant at the time. And I felt compelled to major in sociology, to look at my culture, other cultures, to understand better why we as a society do what we do, and to look at the theorists about culture and mores. And so in a way, I'm sorry. It's too bad I couldn't have done a double major, though, graduating with an English major prepares you for zip. Graduating with a major in sociology wasn't much better.
Right. I can relate because my bachelor's was in music.
Oh.
My master's was in English lit, but yeah, it's like, what are you going to do? Teach, which is what I ended up doing. But yeah, that's so funny. Yeah. So you studied English, but you really like sociology, and that's because even with music, once I graduated with my BA in music, I was thinking I could go into music journalism, right? I mean, there's always, no matter what you study, you could always write about that. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
An interesting idea.
Yeah. And so how then were you such a great writer if you never even studied writing? Like, you're an essayist. Where did you learn how to write essays? Because that's not easy.
Well, let me preface that by saying I'm a lifelong learner. I bored easily, so I'm always wanting to learn new things, acquire new skills. So over the course of my adult life, I've taken many writing workshops with many terrific writers, novelists and nonfiction writers. There's a place in Little Switzerland, North Carolina, where they have what they call writers camp. And they have workshops, and it's a week-long residency. And there's also a Table Rock Writers Conference, which I'm going to this fall because I'm working on a second book. And just being in the company of other writers and learning the craft by taking workshops all over the place, all over North Carolina and out of state. And so that's how I've acquired most of my metalsmithing skills. I acquired that way too.
That is so interesting. I kind of do want to talk a little bit about the metalsmithing, but I do want to mention, you said something so interesting. You said that you're a life learner, and I think it's so important just to always be curious.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Because the more you learn about things, the more indispensable you are as just a person who can talk about anything, who can write about anything, who can,
Correct.
could go into a lot of different fields if you know a lot of stuff. So then let's just talk a little bit about this metalsmithing since you brought it up. Is this tied into the jewelry design?
Yes.
Okay.
I remember driving home from work one day and I was bored.
Yeah.
I always need challenges at work. And I had sort of topped out, my skill set was such that I could do things easily. And I was thinking, what can I do? How can I inject some juice into my life? And I've always loved jewelry. I got it from my mother and her mother.
Yeah.
And I thought, there are designs I'd like to do that I don't see anywhere. And I went home and I opened this, I subscribed to this art craft magazine. And the centerfold was about a jeweler. Now, she was a beater, but she was an exceptional beater who made museum quality pieces. And she eventually had a number of people working for her, implementing her designs. So just like the radio commentary, I thought, well, I can do that. So I started out beading, making beaded pieces that were unusual because I don't like to do anything that's like what's already out there.
Yeah.
And then I thought, well, this is just stringing beads. You do have to learn how to do it well so they don't come unstrung and how to attach it to a clasp. And I thought, I want to learn how to make the metal pieces myself. So once again, I started taking metalsmithing courses. I even went to France.
What?
Anything to get abroad, but to study with, I'm blocking on her name right now, but she's kind of a rock star in the jewelry world and people collect her work. And so it was a 2-week-long workshop in France with her. And then I started, there's a local jeweler he's won awards for his enamel jewelry. But he's not just an enamelist. And I just hired him. I said, I need you to teach me the basics so that I can practice it, like soldering, how to set a stone in a bezel, how to solder two pieces together, how to not melt. That's part of soldering, but how to not melt what you're turning the flame onto, how to make clasps and connections, how to make rings, how to make bracelets. And for a while, he and I worked one-on-one. And then he had a weekly class and we'd show up every Tuesday night. And then we would work on our own projects. There were about 5 of us. And then when one of us got stuck, then he would help. And then that was like a teaching opportunity. And he'd say, everybody come around my desk and let me show you how to do this. Mirinda's having a hard time with this. You others might also be. So let me show you a shortcut or a trick. His name's James Carter, James Carter Studios, and his work is absolutely gorgeous. So we all call him Jimmy. Jimmy taught me a lot. And he was a character too. So
yeah. Did you end up writing at all about the jewelry in any way?
I should have.
Yeah.
That would have been a great idea, but I was so focused on the jewelry that the writing was on the sideline then,
Mm.
because gaining those skills is intense. And I bought all the equipment, like a flex shaft drill that hangs from the ceiling.
Oh,
You can
wow.
drill holes in anything, and a torch. And by the time I had acquired all the tools for metalsmithing, I had spent probably between $2,000 and $3,000. I didn't do it all at once,
Mm.
but I acquired it over time. So I was so obsessed with getting better. This is
Yeah.
not something you can do out of the gate and have it look like it's well done.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. But you were really invested in learning, like you were with the writers' workshops.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And when you were talking about beading, I love classic films, and the movie that came to my mind was this movie called A Patch of Blue. And it's starring Sidney Poitier, and I think her name is Elizabeth Hartman. I can't remember, but
Yeah.
she's a blind young woman, and she like her. I think she gets paid to make jewelry, but she does beads, and she goes to the park every morning. She sits underneath a tree, and she makes her necklaces out of beads. And there's this one scene where I don't know if someone startles her or it starts raining, but her beads spill all over the place.
Oh,
And then here comes Sidney Poitier, just happens to walk by and see her, so, and he helps her get her beads together, and that's kind of how they meet. But I just love that movie, and your beading reminded me of that
darn it. I should have done my beading in the park
in the
and
park.
Sidney Poitier come
I
along.
mean, yeah,
Help
that's
me out.
yeah. You know what? Have you ever thought of writing a screenplay?
Mm, no, not really. But some people are saying that my book should be a movie.
Hmm.
And a friend of mine who worked for one of the major Hollywood studios told me how to do a script outline.
Hmm.
But and I've had some interest,
Yeah.
but I'd rather somebody else do that work.
Hmm. Like
Take my book and
adapting.
do that work. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, maybe after I finish my next book, I'll be interested in a different type of writing.
Yeah.
But for now, I'm kind of focused on my next book and
Yeah.
um, doing even better. Each
Mhm.
book you hope gets better and better
Yeah.
as you
Okay.
write.
So I want to, let's take a step back before we get to your book, because I think it's interesting that I don't know if the genre of essays chose you, or you chose the genre of the essay. I mean, did you write any fiction, or if you were writing for, or you were a columnist, I can't even talk, columnist for a newspaper, correct?
I was.
And were those essays, or were those more like op-ed? Well, op-ed is kind of essay writing,
They were
kind of
more like short essays
short
because I
essays.
was given free reign to write whatever I wanted to write about.
Yeah. Okay.
And I
So,
guess
yeah.
essay writing came about because my book had been in me all my adult life.
Mm.
And I wrote a lot about my father.
Hmm.
He was a World War II hero. He told a lot of stories about um, flying a B-17 bomber. He was a top turret gunner, flying bombing missions over Germany. And I think men who were in World War II are of two camps: one who will never talk about it,
Hmm.
and one's like my father who couldn't stop talking about it.
Mm.
And so I wrote a number of essays about my father's wartime experiences, and how instead of bedtime stories when I got older, I would hear stories about his plane getting in a dogfight with Messerschmitts, and
Mm.
his trying to kill the pilot of the other plane, and he eventually did. But that was really exciting stuff, scary stuff, almost sad stuff. I
Yeah.
don't think he ever got over that, because
Mm.
as a bomber, they didn't see the death and destruction they wrought, because they were thousands of feet up when they opened the bomb bay doors and dropped their bombs in Germany. But when he was in this dogfight, he saw that pilot. He saw his blonde hair sticking out of his cap. And when he shot, he hit the rim below the cockpit window, and he just raised the gun sights a bit, shot again, and he hit the guy in the head. He saw his head slump over, and then the plane went into a tailspin. So these kinds of stories just lived inside me, and my father's heroism, and yet his matter-of-fact way of talking about it. You know, he didn't really show emotion, which I thought was unusual. So that's a long way of saying that I wrote a number of essays about my father for newspapers, and one was published in a book of women's essays, which I can't remember the name of, sadly.
Yeah.
And then I wrote profiles of for a newspaper of a guy who's a puppeteer. Did that on the side, yeah. And I wrote for a couple of national magazines, Psychology Today. That wasn't it was part essay because it was about fibromyalgia, which people know more about now. But when I was diagnosed about 25 years ago, it was a fairly new diagnosis, and people thought maybe this pain is all in your head. And I had a doctor who took it seriously and had a diagnosis. And so I pitched the story to Psychology Today, and they thought it was really interesting. So it was kind of a personal experience that I turned into an article for the magazine, backed up by whatever research had been done at that point and what had been written about it. And a story of another woman who was struggling with it, a very young woman whose life had been affected in every way imaginable because of her pain. And so things like that, you know, my writing was kind of all over the place, which I liked.
Right. But it sounds like your essays were kind of a means of just exploring some of these topics. Like with your father, was it kind of in writing these essays? First of all, was he alive when you were writing these essays?
No.
Okay. So it sounds like it was a way to kind of, just explore what it might have felt like for your father, what it might have been like for your father, explore who your father was as a fighter. Were you trying to, in your essays, connect to him in any way, or was this all just kind of reflection?
Well, that's a really astute point that you're making. I wouldn't have said that talking about it, but I think you're absolutely right. It was a way of connecting to him. He committed suicide in 1980. So I was looking at my relationship with him. I was looking at him. How could this have happened? He was so successful in his life, his career, everything he did. Gold, and yet.
Yeah. And I think was it therapeutic to write these essays?
It was.
Yeah.
But I think that writing the book was the ultimate.
Okay.
Because I put together a lot of pieces. I had to sit with memories, and as I wrote about memories, more memories surfaced. Some of it was very painful, but in the end, it was like putting a puzzle together, and I had all of these pieces, some of which hadn't floated up in my memory, and all of a sudden I was beginning to put these pieces together to put together a picture of my dad, my relationship with him, why he converted from a Jew to a Southern Baptist, which is just never done.
Right.
Just not done.
Yeah, I've never heard of that. When I read that in the book description, I said, "What?" Yeah, that's very interesting. And so you were writing these essays, and so it was like these snapshots of your father and his life that eventually kind of came together, were slowly coming together to form this like bigger story that was within you. But you didn't want to write it straight away, right? This memoir. What was the hesitation in writing the memoir?
Well, first was because my mother was still alive.
Mm.
Because my dad was only 55 when he died, and my mother lived to be 84.
Mm.
So I wasn't going to write about it during her lifetime because I
Yeah.
knew she would be very upset about it. And she died in 2000. And so that's when I started to write. And then I got pushback from one of my siblings. And I thought, well, if it's going to make the family so unhappy, I just won't do it. And I had several chapters already written. And I sat with that for 20 years. And it got to the point where it was like it had been growing inside me until it was so big, I had to get it out.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, I mean, this is being really dramatic, but this is how I felt at the time, metaphorically.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I would die if I didn't write this book.
Mm-hmm.
So I called both my sisters, and my brother I don't talk to very often. And I said, I know you're not going to be happy about this, but I'm going to write this book. And they said, well, do what you have to do. Just, we don't want to have anything to do with it. And I said, well, you have to be in it.
Mm-hmm.
Only a mention, because I can't write about the family without saying, well, I had siblings.
Right. Yeah.
And I gave them pseudonyms, and I told them what their pseudonyms were. So they're mentioned in the book, but there's nothing about them. There's no scenes with them in particular.
Was that difficult to have them play such a minimal role in the story?
Actually not, because interestingly, I'm the eldest of four, and my youngest sister is 10 years my junior. My mother thought she was going through menopause when she was pregnant with my youngest sister.
Wow.
So I am very different from the rest of my family. I was more interested in the Jewish side of my family because they were the writers, the musicians, the intellectuals.
Mm.
They were the interesting ones.
Mm-hmm.
Where my mother's side of the family were, well, I'll just come right out and say it. They were racists. I mean, this was in the 50s and 60s. And one of my cousins had a swastika, German swastika, hanging in his bedroom. And I always wondered what my father thought of that when we visited them, because this was my mother's twin sister. So we saw a lot of them, unfortunately for me, because I didn't like to. Anyway, I'm straying. Back to the point. As I grew older, I just hived off to my room. And I didn't really play with my younger siblings. I read all the time. I started reading Charles Dickens when I was 12.
Wow.
And I went through everything Charles Dickens read within 2 or 3 years.
What?
Yes.
Wow.
I wouldn't have the patience to read his convoluted sentences now, but
That's quite an accomplishment.
And I think the fact that I was a voracious reader suited me well for becoming a writer. But I had to learn to write clean, because I started writing in the style of the, in the Charles Dickens era, and that wouldn't go over.
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. So you said some pretty interesting things, Mirinda. So, because I think a lot of people experience this, where especially when you want to write about something personal, you're concerned about what your loved ones are going to think or say. So a lot of people delay it or just never write it. Or some people go through with it, and the pushback and the feedback they get from their family. Some I've seen on Twitter, just going through some tweets, where writers or post things like, my family's not talking to me anymore because what I wrote, and it can be very difficult when you're writing something so personal. So after the book was published, how did your siblings feel?
They weren't happy. And I told them when I started writing it, I said, this is not an angry book. This is not a book about settling scores. This is not a book about you. It's
Mm-hmm.
a book about me,
Mm-hmm.
about my memories, my relationship with our parents. You would probably write an entirely different story because of your birth order, and you had different experiences of our parents than I did.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I feel very good about the book. That the book is compassionate, and it doesn't paint either of my parents as bad people or monsters. It shows them in their full humanity.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but my youngest sister's very private, and I think that just the fact of my father's suicide probably bothered her, but she hasn't talked to me about it since the book
Mm-hmm.
came out.
Mm-hmm. And when in writing the book, because you said you didn't you're really proud of the fact that you didn't demonize either of your parents. Is that something that came naturally? You're not demonizing them, or is that something that an editor really helped you with?
No, it came naturally
Mm-hmm.
because the book was written out of love
Mm-hmm.
and sadness and a deep desire to understand, because they were products of their own love-starved childhoods. I think they were two
Mm-hmm.
people who didn't really know how to love or express love and affection.
Yeah.
And from what I know about their parents, they didn't get it from their parents. So
Right. Yeah.
I look at it that way.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
when you're a child and you're not getting that, you don't realize you're not getting it because it's just your norm. But it does have an impact as you go on in life.
Mhm. Yeah. I think that's I can relate to that because as a child you really don't understand your parents' pain. And
Correct.
so, and a lot of, my parents were divorced when I was young. Well, they separated when I was 11 and they divorced by the time I was 17.
Mm.
But all I saw was the animosity between the two of them. And of course, being 11 years old, I took it personally, like, oh my goodness, there's something.
Or that it was your fault.
Right, yeah. And it wasn't until maybe, I don't know, 10 years ago where I really started to think about, wait, my parents were kids and they had parents and their childhoods were not rosy at all. And
Hmm.
they experienced a lot of pain themselves. And I started to visualize my parents as younger kids
Interesting.
experiencing the pain. And that helped to give me a lot of compassion and understanding because they were just doing the best that they could when as parents, right? Based on their
Absolutely.
parenting.
That's
Yeah.
right. They do the best they can. And I did the best I could under the circumstances with my two sons.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure, they would have a lot of fault to find,
Yeah.
and it would be legitimate. Um, but I hope they know that I love them desperately
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and still do.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what did your next book, is this in any way connected to the rope of life?
No, it's totally different.
Oh.
It's a memoir, but it has to do with my pinball working career, my pinball career, where I bounced from one
Oh.
interesting job to another,
Yes.
how I accomplished that, and what happened. I had some really interesting jobs. I was communications manager for a Raleigh Durham Airport Authority 6 weeks before 9/11.
Wow.
So, and I was the face of the airport. I had to be on TV. I had reporters following me home. I had to give a press conference the day of 9/11 to every news camera in the whole Triangle area, trained on me. I hadn't had time to prepare my remarks because I was just handling phone calls and telling my web director what to put up on the web. And fortunately, I was in my 40s when I had that job, and I had enough experience that I surprised myself by being calm and focused and reassuring. And friends who saw me later said, I felt very reassured by what you said.
Hmm.
Um, and then at Duke, I helped start a program for visiting journalists from the major publications, New York Times, Washington Post, Time Magazine then. And then I traveled to recruit foreign journalists. I went to Japan for Japanese journalists. We had them in the program, French journalists, German journalists. I had some really interesting experiences with them. So I figured, this book will be a sort of a compendium of what a career can look like when you're not a person who feels like I'm going to be this and I'm going to be this for my whole life.
Yes. Yeah.
Because I had no idea when I graduated college what I wanted to be.
Mm-hmm.
All I knew was I wanted to put as much distance between me and Danville, Virginia, where I grew up, as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to Japan on my first job after a year in the States. So, it's just...
That's far. That's really far.
Put a lot of distance between me.
Oh my gosh. This is why I really wanted to talk to you, because I'm a high school teacher, so I work with high school students, and I think it's really a disservice to kids when we say at the age of 18, okay, you need to pick one thing that you want to do for the rest of your life and study that thing for 4 or 5 years in college. And because who knows what your life is going to bring 5 years down the line, 10 years, 15 years down the line, right? I mean, there's so many opportunities open, and you're only 17 or 18. You have no idea what you might be capable of, right? And so for you to travel all these places and do all of these different things in your life, I mean, I really feel like you're an explorer at heart, Mirinda.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm most excited and most ecstatic when I'm setting foot in a foreign country, mm-hmm. and I have that whole place to explore. And I've been alone because I was single between my 2 marriages for almost 25 years. And I went to Turkey by myself. I went to France several times. I just love France. But I've been all over Europe. I've been to Tahiti. I've been to South America. So you're right. I am an explorer, and that is partially why I had many different jobs. And I think you're absolutely right that you can't know when you're 17 or 18. Your brain isn't even fully developed at that age. And some people know as children, I want to be an actor, I want to be a writer, I want to be a doctor, and they follow through on that, and they have very satisfying careers. I wasn't one of those people, and I am not unhappy with the way I did it. I have lots of great memories to look back on.
And did you find that it took courage for you to do this, or was this just something? Was the courage natural, or were there moments or places where you've been where you had to think, "Oh, should I really do this, or am I doing the right thing? What am I?"
I never thought of myself as having courage. I may have been foolhardy in some cases. I got into my siblings would tease me because I usually would come back injured from some of my trips. I came back from Turkey with 3 broken ribs.
Oh my goodness!
Which is something I did to myself when the electricity went off in the middle of the night, and the bathroom light I turned on, of course, was dark, and I was trying to find the bathroom, and instead I slammed into a bureau. And so fortunately it was at the end of my trip. But usually I sprained an elbow in France, one of my France, slipping on a bathroom floor, and went down. Dislocated it. So it looked pretty gnarly, but I got firsthand exposure to the French hospital system and French medicine.
I mean, I think it's great that you can find the good in situations that most people would just like, oh my gosh, I dislocated, this is horrible, right? But it sounds like it just opened up another opportunity for you to learn a little bit about French hospitals, or to at least experience a French hospital.
And it was, it was painful at first, but then I took some over-the-counter pain pills, and I wore a sling for a while, but it didn't stop me
Mm-hmm.
I did everything I wanted to do.
Yeah, yeah. That's what a wonderful, that movie, It's a Wonderful Life. That's one of my favorite movies. What a
Yeah.
wonderful life, Miranda. Um, Tell us where we can find you.
You mean online?
Yeah, and yes, where can we find more about you online? Where can we find your book if we want to learn more about you?
Yes. Well, I have a website,
Mm-hmm.
MirindaKossoff.com.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be careful. It's two S's as in Sam and two F's,
Mm-hmm.
Kossoff. And Mirinda is with two I's, Mirinda. People always want to make me Miranda. I'm not. I was named for my grandmother and my great-grandmother. And my book can be purchased. It's the full title is The Rope of Life, a memoir. It's on Amazon. It's in Audible format, so you can listen to it. You can download it on Kindle. You can buy the paperback. You can order it from any bookstore, anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
They may not have it in stock, but you can order it.
Yeah, yeah. And I want to give you this opportunity, if you have any closing words of wisdom or encouragement for people who are coming into writing like later on in their lives, and they're kind of wondering like where to start. How do I take my desire to write and actually turn it into something that is going to help myself get through whatever I'm going through personally, or even help other people?
What a great question. My advice would be to really be in touch with your inner voice. I have a gut that they always talk about gut feelings, but we do have brain cells in our GI tract. So those gut feelings actually do relate to something going on. And to pay attention to that, and whatever seems big in your life, that could be a jumping off point for writing. And you don't have to think, oh, I'm writing this for publication, because that might scare you. I would say just, jump in and write about whatever's concerning you at the moment. And also it helps. I'm not a great example of this, because I cheese off sometimes, but writing morning pages, I have been doing it. I stopped for a while, but every morning set the cell phone for 15 minutes and write without taking the pen off the paper, whatever comes into your head.
Yeah.
And sometimes I would write, boy, this is boring. I don't have anything in my head right now. My mind is blank, and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. But then interesting things would pop up, things that I could tease out for an essay or a story. And I have written short stories, fictional short stories, but I don't think they were very good, and I haven't submitted any of them for publication. But I would say don't let lack of experience in the rest of your life stop you, and take every opportunity to take advantage of programs at your local university, online, for writing. Whatever genre you're interested in, there's so much out there on the web that you can take advantage of that will help you.
Great advice. Thank you, Mirinda.
And then there's some great books. Like I love Mary Carr's book on writing, on memoir writing.
Mary Karr.
Karr.
Oh, okay. I just read a book by this really famous Sol Stein. Have you heard of him?
Yes.
Yes. I forgot what the book is. I think it's called On Writing or something. But it's a really, really great tips on kind of taking, strategies that you use to write fiction and using them to write nonfiction. So
absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. Mirinda, thank you so much. I'm going to stop recording, but I'm just going to chat with you for a moment.
Sure.
I love Mirinda's story. I feel it serves as a template, an exemplar for anyone, but in particular young people, or even, just anyone, because I think a lot of middle-aged people, even older people, find themselves in situations where they're just trying to figure out what it is they want to do now, they want to do next. They've been doing something for maybe 20 years, like myself. I've been teaching for 20 years. And you're kind of wondering, like, what's the next chapter? Because you don't want to spend the next 20 years doing the same thing you did for the previous 20 years. So it's never too late to change. It's never too late to learn. You don't have to stick with something, one career, one job, one whatever for the rest of your life. There's just so many options and things to do in the world. If you're interested to learn more about Mirinda, then please visit her website and, of course, purchase her book. She has such a fascinating life. And in the meantime, visit zazo.com and sign up for my newsletter. And you can follow me on social media. I'm on Twitter at Ebony Haywood. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram at Motivation to Write. Thank you so much for tuning in. And I will see you next week when I talk to another fabulous guest. Bye-bye.